A lot goes into a fighter intercept. It's not just flying in a straight line at a radar contact. In fact, I have an entire video series on this channel explaining how to correctly do an intercept and why it's even done in the first place. And if you've watched those videos, you might feel like you're ready to try out an intercept yourself. I have some good news for you then. I've created a mission for DCS that will let you see how good you really are and give you the opportunity to get better at it if you need it. Do you want to know how this mission works and where you can get a free copy? Keep watching to find out. This mission is purely about the mechanics behind an intercept. There's no actual combat. But if you're looking for a mission that covers the combat aspect, I've got you covered. There's not one but two combat training missions available. One is for visual range combat after an intercept, and another one is for beyond visual range engagements. Links for everything will be in the description. For this mission, you'll have a sandbox-style environment where you can spawn in a target aircraft and then intercept it using the technique covered in this video. So if there's something in this mission that doesn't make sense, check out that video. It'll cover everything you need to know. Now, this mission isn't just a spawn generator. It'll provide guidance to help you practice all the phases of an intercept. That guidance will show up here. Let's cover what it all means. At the top, we have a bullseye reference letting you know where the target is in relation to our bullseye. That happens to be the airbase we're defending in this scenario. So at any time, you can look at the airbase and get a rough idea of where the target is in relation to it. Just as long as it's within sight, of course. Also, you can set your TACAN receiver to the beacon at the airbase, then you have your own bullseye reference always showing in the cockpit. Bullseye references are covered in more detail in this video. Below the bullseye, we have a BRA call, so you'll get bearing, range, altitude, and aspect information on the target. This way you know where to point your jet even if you don't have a radar contact. This aspect is going to be displayed just like you would see in some of the more modern fighter jets. It'll help you decide how best to approach a target. I go over the aspect more in the baseline intercept video, but to help you out, there will be tips in the next line of our guidance window. As you progress through the various phases of the intercept, you'll get a hint here on what you need to do. All you have to do is follow the prompt and it'll get you to where you need to be. That means in a position of advantage just behind the target. From this position, you can visually ID the TOI and, if needed, employ weapons. When I say TOI, I mean the track of interest. This is the real-world term for the target of an intercept. At this point, it's a radar track that the defenders are interested in and not necessarily a confirmed adversary which has met the criteria for being shot at. Though we won't be using weapons in this mission, you still want to practice getting to a place where you have an advantage and a potential enemy is at a disadvantage, which is of course right behind him. The intercept doesn't end once you get here. When a fighter intercepts a TOI that's entered restricted airspace, it needs to get that aircraft to leave. You do that by flying alongside the aircraft to get the crew's attention. So you'll fly beside the TOI until you get notified of a new radio option. That new radio option is a call to the TOI to leave the airspace. Once you make that call, your job is done and you can return to your combat air patrol orbit to wait for your next tasking. And in this mission, you can keep on creating more targets to intercept. It sounds simple enough, but like with everything in aviation, it's a lot harder in the cockpit than it is in the video. So let's go over an example of how it all works within DCS. When you first start up the mission, you'll be in the air over Kutaisi Air Base in central Georgia, heading towards your cap orbit. That's the position where you fly a racetrack pattern as part of a combat air patrol to defend an area. In the mission's briefing screen, you'll see how that position is defined. It's this point on the 070 radio of the 44 X-ray TACAN at 3 miles distance and 22,000 feet of altitude. So if you set that up on your jet's TACAN, then you can follow the outbound radial and get right to where you need to be. But if you don't want to do that, just remember the base itself is bullseye, and you just need to be a few miles east of it. The runway goes east and west, so just follow an imaginary line off the end of the runway. From there, fly the orbit however you feel is best. What's important is that the legs of the orbit point you in the direction of the potential threats. That way you maximize the amount of time your weapons and radar are pointed at where an enemy may come from. In this mission, all the intercept targets will spawn to the east. There is some randomization built in, so you won't always fly the same heading to do the intercept. but for the most part, they'll all come from somewhere in the eastern hemisphere of the orbit. Now, this mission was created with the F5 in mind. However, you can switch the aircraft type to something else in the mission editor if you'd like. And since the guidance logic provides you with bearing information, you can try aircraft without radar too. Even the free ones that come with DCS could technically work. When you're ready, you can bring up the radio menu to create an intercept target. There are 2 levels of difficulty you can select from here. Level 1 has a TOI that flies the same path and altitude every time it's spawned. Level 2 randomizes the path and altitude, which can make the intercept more challenging. Spawn whichever one works for your skill level. You can do this from anywhere on the map, but I recommend starting an intercept from the cap orbit. Getting closer will cut down on the amount of time you have for doing all the steps. Starting from farther away will just make the intercept take longer while allowing the target to get closer to the airbase you're defending, so it's best to be in the cap orbit. The first thing you'll see is a short exchange between you and the controller setting up the commit. If you want to know more about this, check out my video on commits. Once you have an intercept target headed your way, your first task is to point your nose at a spot in the sky where your aircraft and the target will meet sometime in the future. You do that by orienting the jet ahead of the target on your radar display. So if it's moving right to left on the scope, then you turn to place your heading to the target's left. When the target is moving down the display and not drifting to either side, then you have the correct angle. This is called Collision Antenna Train Angle, or CATA for short. We cover this in detail in the baseline intercept video, and you'll see guidance telling you to set this angle. If you're having trouble getting this exactly right, just pick a heading that puts you in front of the target. So if it's traveling right to left, then pick a heading that is to the left of the target's bearing shown in the guidance window. That should get you close enough, even if it's not perfect. Once you're on the right angle or near it, you'll see the range on the target trickle down. When you get within 25 miles, the guidance will switch to the next phase, which is setting an offset. We built some offset rooms so we have enough space to make the final turn onto the target's tail. Flying straight at the target won't give us any room to turn. To visualize offset, think about flying a circle around and behind the target. For that, we'll need to switch from flying in front of the target to putting the nose behind the target, just like the tooltip says. But we don't want to build too much room because then we'll end up falling behind the target after we make the turn. So that's why we keep it at 12 aspect angle as shown in the tip. 12 AA will get us to where we need to be before the final turn onto the TOI's tail. We'll hold this aspect until we're between 6 and 8 miles range. Remember that we can see range in our guidance window. The tip will stay here until you're at the closer end of the 6 to 8 mile range, but feel free to move to the next phase earlier if you think you're ready. The tips will catch up eventually. Right around this range, you should be able to visually acquire the TOI, so start looking outside the cockpit. The TOIs will all be larger aircraft like these transports, so they shouldn't be too hard to spot. And that leads us to the next phase where we'll see pure pursuit shown in the guidance window. This will be the easiest phase. Following all the previous instructions will put you in the right place to just point your nose at the target. This will naturally pull you around the circle and into a position of advantage on the target. This is why we follow all the previous steps. We want to set ourselves up to make this last part as easy as possible since a lot will be happening here. When you're less than a mile away and behind the target, your next step will be to fly alongside the target. Now you'll want to gradually speed up to get next to it. For this scenario, alongside means flying ahead of the target's 3-9 line within a quarter mile and no more than 100 feet above or below it in altitude. You'll need to maintain this position for at least 10 seconds to give the aircrew time to notice you. If you haven't been practicing formation flying, then this may be the hardest part of the intercept. But once you hold that position for 10 seconds, you'll get a new message in the guidance window. This new radio option will order the target to leave the restricted airspace. You can get to it via the radio menu's F10 option. Once you send the message, you'll see the target veer off and fly away. At this point, your intercept is complete, and you'll get a message to return to your cap station. You can keep spawning targets to get more practice, and I do recommend flying this mission multiple times. Now this all looks simple, but it's a lot harder when you're at the controls. That's the entire point of this training mission. It's a way for you to get better. With enough practice, you can become a pro at intercepts. So if you think this mission is for you, then you can try it out for free at the link below. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.